and then have the beat, and then have it come in. Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Jordan, as always, my co-host and esteemed colleague, my father, John Cohn, coming at you with the best news. So this is our pilot episode, guys. We really wanted to, start, at least for me, I really wanted to reminisce about some of the memories I had growing up in North Florida wrestling and the opportunities I was afforded. Being in a position where I had someone like my father who was a up and coming elite ref in the area, and I was always very lucky to have a lot of relationships with coaches, and I am excited to really rekindle that and help them get their message out and grow their programs. What about you, Dad? What's your inspiration for getting in on this with me?
Well, as a youth, I was very passionate about the sport of wrestling as a competitor. Was not able to really see my dreams and passions proceed to where I want. I just didn't have the network of encouragement and motivation. So, that part of my wrestling experience was limited, whereas you kind of took it to a completely different level, and that was the reason why I, in my late 20s, reconnected with the sport, is because I was still very passionate about it, and my competition days obviously were beyond me, but becoming an official and then also getting involved in coaching, um, again, allotted me the vehicle to reconnect with the sport that I truly loved. And then as you started to age and I exposed you to wrestling and you expressed an interest, that enabled me to live somewhat vicariously, I guess, through you and of course, watching you succeed and meet and nurture relationships that you still have today with your contemporary competitors and coaches and officials. It just everything's kind of come full circle again to where we through modern technology can in real time um, you know bring what our passion to the table, and then hopefully include, as you stated in the intro, bring other people into what we're trying to do, and that is highlight the um, the North Florida wrestling area and beyond eventually, if that comes to. And I find it, as a side note, very rewarding that you and I get to do this together, and I hope that it succeeds like I think it will. So back to you.
Well, and I think something that you mentioned that is incredibly important, actually a couple things. One, the fact that you felt like you had to give up. I was just talking to some of the wrestlers that I coach. I'm an instructor at the Niceville Wrestling Academy, for those who don't know. But I was very much talking to them that that they're getting older. They're going into their senior season, and I'm like, at the end of the season, you don't have to be done with wrestling. There are all sorts of avenues to stay with it, but you don't really need to like let it go. And I'm excited for this because it'll keep that conversation going. And no matter what you're doing or where you're going, or where they're going off to college, or even if they don't wrestle or not, they can still listen back on an episode, or they can catch up and listen how their own team's doing, or how North Florida's doing, or how it's growing. And I mean, you see it all the time. How often do you see coaches and parents and all these kids that are helping out programs that have graduated, how much passion they still have for their teams in wrestling. Everybody has a glory day. Everybody has like a match. Everybody has one of those things that they love talking about where they overcame something in themselves and they, hold North Florida wrestling incredibly dear. And I think that cohesiveness, that cohesive feeling, permeating throughout the year after year, is something that'll really be beneficial. And I think that we can offer through this show.
Well, one thing I think, having played and been involved as a competitor, a coach, an official of several sports, I think all sports have their communities and their passions that are peripheral to the sport itself. But I think wrestling is very, very unique. It's a very unique community. It's very close knit, and I think a lot of it has to do with the very intimate environment in which competitions are held. The fact that the sport of wrestling is inclusive to the little guys as opposed to the bigger competitors, and I think that's where it's a little bit different than a lot of sports. Not saying that the little guy in other sports can't compete and be successful, but there are competitions amongst those similar sized athletes that range from someone who's barely over 100 pounds or less than 100 pounds to somebody that's almost 300 pounds. So, and the beauty of wrestling too is that you see the same people, and not just the competitors and coaches, but the families that support their children. The fundraising aspect of wrestling being that it's not a nationally recognized spectator sport. I think that also kind of defines how tight the community is, and I think that what we're attempting to do is showcase not only the people that are directly involved in growing it, perpetuating it, the coaches and the athletes, but also the wrestling community as a whole. And this is our pilot episode, and there'll be some things we have to work out and things that we tweak with it, but the overall thing that I'm excited about is that we make the entire community of wrestling included in this, and that they all enjoy what we're trying to do. And I'm just excited to be able to do it with you and to include several contacts and relationships that we've formed over the 2 decades plus that we've been involved with it. And I'm ready to go. I'm anxious to get it going.
I think, yeah, exactly. I think it's an incredibly exciting time, not just in, wrestling as a whole, but North Florida wrestling. I think with everything going on, I think with women's wrestling really taking off, I think that's going to add, that's been such an under-tapped demographic for such a long time for a lot of clubs that, that were, maybe struggling to get numbers. Now that's a very, people like Menson Stock have, blown that wide open, started to add a lot of spotlight to that area, as well as something that I really love. I wish they had it when back when, I was wrestling and competing, is I love these war zones. I love the war zone concept. I think it's a great way to really get a lot of kids into it. Because, how it was for us, a lot of times it was either hit or miss, but if there was like a big tournament that we went to that was an NHSCA one where normally it's like, just get matches. But if you just happen to run into a bunch of studs that tournament and you're a beginner wrestler, you might just go 0-2. With these war zones, man, you can get like 4 or 6 matches. And alluding back to what you were saying about how, even the little guy or the under athletic guy gets his chance, gets his time. Wrestling is such a sport of, no matter how well or how many championships you get, or if any, how many wrestlers do we know that we either were a part of a team or coached that maybe not have been the most athletic, but they did get their day. You know what I'm saying? They did eventually get, a match that they could hold on to for the rest of life and it would be meaningful for them. So I think that's why there's such a passion around wrestling.
Well, I think that the unique opportunity we have here is to, through our experiences through the sport, the knowledge that we've gained, and that we continue to gain. This gives us a vehicle to kind of put that stuff out there. And what I'm directly referring to right now is this war zone concept of competition that you are familiar with, that I'm not. So while you have it fresh in your mind, explain for those that might be listening the concept of the war zone competition.
Oh, thank you. I totally. It's so crazy. So it's very much like, well, it's not crazy. It's just one of those things where it makes sense. So just as with chess ratings, you sign up for this event and you get a rating compared to your weight, age, experience level, the best they can. And of course, there's going to be some discrepancies at first, but the more matches that you wrestle, the better it gets a chance to measure your experience level. And it will match you up with people in a very round robin sort of way. And so you might wrestle someone that does weigh more than you, but is inexperienced. So it tries to balance it out as much as possible. So it gives those close matches. So it's not just some kid coming through and tearing through everybody that weighs the exact same as them. It's like, okay, we're here to challenge you. And I love the concept of, if you win 2 matches, you get a bronze medal. 3 matches, you get a silver. 4, you get a gold. So it really challenges those kids to fight through adversity. It happened with Steven, my own kid. He went off and rattled 2 wins, ran up against 2 absolute studs, and then found himself having to really decide that, I'm like, hey, you can wrestle the 2 matches if you want. And it's in the parents' control too. Easy. You get in, wrestle your matches in 2-hour time span. Super wonderful. But it was up to him to dig deep and say, I want another match. I want another match. I want to get that silver. I want to get that gold. So I think it's something that will help really grow the sport. It'll help get a lot of kids very interested and attached to the sport.
Yeah, when you first told me about the war zone concept, I thought it was very unique, and I think that I think that's an endeavor to, whether it's a direct result or not, I think that, because an athlete's confidence is key on whether they continue or not. And I think the difference between somebody that succeeds at something and somebody that fails at something is continuing to work at what you're doing. It doesn't matter what it is. I think the only time you really fail is when you stop trying. So when the sport of wrestling, because it is such a physically demanding and emotionally and mental demanding sport, that, as you referenced, and we've both seen it hundreds of times, where you have this mismatched situation. You have a athlete that wants to be involved in the sport, but gets on the mat and gets absolutely destroyed by someone who is much more skilled or stronger than them. And then, that beating they take can affect the confidence level. And again, just like I said, we've both seen it, where, kids get out there that may have some potential and may have a passion for the sport, but they get out there and they just get cremated, and they're just like, well, the hell with this. This isn't for me. As opposed to that concept you're talking about, where, you're pitted against similar experience levels, and you are actually able to compete and experience some success, which creates that confidence. And then, it's easier to deal with the losses if you have some successes kind of thrown in there with the losses. And I think it's a great concept, and I hope it catches on.
So let me ask you, I just recently had both my kids start competing, and I was thinking back to, I actually kind of got into the conversation with another one of the coaches at the Niceville Wrestling Academy about how soon should you put a kid in competition? Is it one of the things you should read, or do you think? Because I was thinking, like, I'm like, oh, well, I wrestled my first year of wrestling, but that's not completely true because I had that whole year of fifth grade to get ready, kind of get the idea of it. And prior to this last tournament, prior to, him getting, the wins, and even the second tournament of Steven and Chris getting, the third, I had wondered if I had thrown them in there too early at that first tournament after they had been in there for only for like 2 or 3 months. And like, I knew that it had, like you said, the confidence level with Steven, I think he wrestled tough, but just went 0-4. So it really, I questioned that call, and then it made it worth it, now seeing him be able to overcome and see how much pride he takes in that gold medal, having gone through that adversity. So where do you stand on that? Where do you stand on, how did you feel about starting me then? Do you think you would have gotten me started earlier, or do you think it was really a perfect time for me to start competing after learning?
Well, I think all those factors really kind of come into play when it comes to making the right, quote unquote, right call to, put your athlete on the mat to compete. I think that the coaching and the support or lack thereof goes more into it than having a set age or experience level to start the athlete in competing, because from my own experience when you were getting started, I a lot of times that I was a little overzealous and had some unreal expectations about your progress, and I think that you persevered through that, and I learned from that, and I think that goes a long way. And I've seen you interact with your boys on the mat, and you're very supportive regardless of whether there's a loss or whether there's a win, and that you have to find that balance and realize that you can win in a loss by learning. And that's what I find, that's what I see in you. And I see the exact opposite with a lot of coaches and especially parents that, expect too much, maybe too soon, because it really doesn't matter how much practice time you have in the wrestling room. It's a different ball game when you get out there and toe the line and you actually wrestle against somebody else. I mean, I remember someone that we came to know from afar, and then personally, David Craig, told us one time that wrestling is a hard sport to learn and it's a hard sport to do. It's not a sport that you watch on television a lot and can get an idea of how to play it, like maybe basketball or baseball, even though the skills that you have to be learned as well. Wrestling is a very tough physical sport that, can be overwhelming for young competitors, especially in the beginning when they're new to it. So I think, to specifically answer your question, I think you have to gauge it as the coach and as the parent. And then when those losses invariably come, because, unless you're just super gifted and, super athletically superior to who you're competing against, there's probably going to be more losses in the beginning than there are victories. So I think with putting your little guy or little girl on the mat to compete, as a coach, you have to be prepared. As a parent, you have to be prepared to continue to build your child up and help them learn from what they're doing. Because I've always said that wrestling, it's a great sport in the competition realm, but it also helps you in life, as all sports can inherently. But I think wrestling in particular, because there's such a physical demand and a mental demand, that those lessons learned carry on way beyond your competition days. And I think most wrestlers that have wrestled can attest to that. So I think, you have to gauge it, but there also has to be legitimate support and legitimate confidence building from the people that are networked in helping those athletes.
I think you hit it right on the head. Right on the head. There's no telling. You can't I like what you're saying. Like you can't really put too much on them too early. It's I get it too. Like going from one side of it to the other side of it, real fast. Because there's even a difference of being like just a coach and then being a parent, let alone being a coach parent. Feeling like not trying to put too much unreal expectations on them and just let them enjoy the sport. That's what I've been trying to do this first year they've been in it. It's like, just let them enjoy it. Like, if the wins come, the wins come. The losses come, the losses come. Like, just being able to now see them get excited to go to wrestling practice, or be like, like seeing the changes too. We were asking Steven the other day. I was like, physical changes aside, because you've seen like the overwhelming physical changes that he's gone through from since he started wrestling. But we're like, physical changes aside, do you think how do you think wrestling has changed you in a positive way, and like how so? And he said a couple of things, and he went, one thing that really struck us though, that we thought he might give us generic answers, but one thing he really was specific was like, it definitely humbled me. It humbled me a lot to get out there on the mat, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, that's what the sport's for. But it takes a culture. It takes time to build that culture up, though. We build up that real pride in North Florida wrestling. I think that we can get more kids because the talent is there. I've always said that. I've always believed that the athletic talent is there. It's just, really getting a program that when we put the kids into it, we're going to get success out of it. But how are you feeling about wrapping this one up for the day and getting to the editing? Or do you want to continue?
Yeah, we can wrap it up. I just want to point out something that is very unique. No, I think that something that's very unique to the sport of wrestling. And I think that, you see it all the time, that I think wrestling, because of the design of the competition area, because I think it's just as much a mental sport as it is a physical sport, that you can, as we talked about earlier, you can take an athlete that's at the high school level, less than 100 pounds, maybe not super athletically gifted, but through hard work and perseverance and conditioning, they can achieve legitimate success through just sheer hard work. And I think that you can measure a lot of athletic attributes about a person, but you can't really measure their want to. And I use you as a prime example because I think that you stuck to it and persevered, and you worked hard at it because you're passionate. And I can attest, being Matt's side personally and seeing you defeat many a competitor that was probably more athletically gifted than you, but you perfected the tools needed to succeed on the mat and were able to come up victorious over athletes that maybe could run faster than you or jump faster than you or bench press more than you. But that's the beauty about wrestling, is that it's a thinking person's sport, and I think that your success attributes to that. And I think that I really believe that it is a great sport to enhance those attributes for less than athletically gifted competitors.
Well, as it takes a village to build a child, and I think this is a great time to end because our first guest on the North Florida Wrestling Show is going to be someone that played a great part in my development, and that I attribute a lot of my, a lot of growth as a wrestler and later on as a person. Mr. Jeff Skipper, as you know, is very close to both of us. Excited to have him on the show next week. So make sure you tune in to episode number 2 of the North Florida Wrestling Show. Thank you, Dad, for joining me with this. It's been fun. I can't wait to continue on. What about you?
Yeah, I'm excited too to get Coach Skip on there and pick his brain about his thoughts and experiences, and and then to venture past that and to grow this thing even bigger. And it's a privilege and honor to be able to do it with you. And I'm glad that and for those out there, this is Jordan's baby. This was his thought and his idea, and I'm glad that you asked me to be a part of it. So, in that wrestling community, we'll see you next time.
Take care.